Okay. The floor is yours, Lisa.
Oh, I thought you were going to say a few words. All right, I will open this up. And actually the way I want to open this up is by invoking Susan Griffin, who's a writer who I imagine has been important to many of you who are here today, and who is, I know, has been important to Deena. And she died on Monday, as some of you know, probably most of you know. And just this morning, I was thinking about her and thinking how much her book, A Chorus of Stones, has in common with Deena's book, The Story That Must Not Be Told. And I I'm at my cabin now, so I don't have access to all my books, but I went online and found this quote from A Chorus of Stones, which I think could be an epigraph to Deena's book. We are like stones, our own history and the history of the world embedded in us. We hold a sorrow deep within and cannot weep until that history is sung. I think that would make a fabulous epigraph to Deena's book. And since I'm making epigraphs and talking about the presence of the dead, I want to also invoke Perdita Finn, who's probably written more about our relationship to the dead than anyone. In her book, Take Back the Magic, she writes, "The dead are standing ready to guide us where we need to go." This is very much a book about being guided by the dead. I have to admit that what first drew me to this book, I was so curious, what could possibly have interrupted Deena's work on her novel?
Hmm.
If you know Deena, you know something about her formidable boundaries when it comes to her writing time. So what was this story I'd been hearing about that not only came between her and her novel in progress, Broken Lambs, for long periods of time, but made her put off the publication date? I think it was originally 2 years ago. She put it off indefinitely so she could complete the story. What was it about this story? And as I made my way through the story that must be told, I gradually came to understand. By the time I'd finished, my understanding was complete. There was a mystery, undeniable and unskirtable, and Deena finally had to surrender to it. The mystery had everything to do with events that are happening right now in the US and around the world because of what's happening in the US, and especially events in Israel and in Gaza. The mystery. A German man comes to Deena looking for information about his sister who had killed herself. He first writes to her, and then he shows up at her door. And that person named Wolfgang Andreasen is here actually, and may say a word at some point later on. He's here among us today. His sister Ina had been in Deena's class in the feminist studies, in the feminist studio workshop, and it had made a profound impression on her. So he, Wolfgang, thought that Deena might be able to provide some clues about her suicide. The strange thing about this request and this visit is that this class at this feminist studio workshop was in it was in the early 70s, 1973. And the sister's suicide had happened in 1974.
Right.
In 75. Why was he coming after Deena just now, 50 years later? In a way, the whole book is an answer to that question. And it's also an answer to the question of why did Ina, his sister, kill herself? Deena surrenders to the mystery, and she begins exploring the history of Ina's family. Now, I think a lot of you here have worked with Deena. If you have worked with her in just about any capacity, you know how she feels about psychologizing. Not that it isn't useful as a lens, but you know how she feels about psychologizing when it's the only lens, how limited and misleading an approach it can be. Heretofore, the ways in which Ina's suicide had been understood were mostly psychological. She had been emotionally abused by her mother. She was discouraged about her artistic career. So Deena begins to explore the family history. And now I have to excuse myself because I'm at my cabin with no printer, and I'm going through notes and I'm going to shuffle them a lot. I wasn't able to put this in a linear order, but in a way, I think it recapitulates the way that the whole book came into being, because there were pieces of a puzzle, and the pieces didn't all fall into place at once. They fell into place bit by bit. And so reading this book is a little bit like reading a detective story or a detective thriller. You're looking for clues, and they only start to all come together at the end. So Deena starts exploring the family history. These are the pieces that Deena is putting together. And she will be talking about them. Will you be quoting from the Hamburger Anzeiger, "The New Germany has no use for criminals and weaklings, perverts and inverts, but instead requires straightforward and sincere manly souls," which has to be said because if anyone, all of us know about the speech that Pete Hegseth gave. I think it was on Monday. And this language comes so close to language that was used by Hegseth. So Deena plunges into the mystery of Ina's family, and discovers that, as Ina herself says, we came from a family that helped to create hell on earth. I want to say this, to quote Deena, "The alarm increases every day, and the writer is astounded as the country is propelled toward ruination by a madman. Ina wants the book out now so that we can be informed and guided." And I want to end with another quote from Perdita Finn. "Even though I work with the dead daily and teach others how to connect with their loved ones on the other side, I am still stunned by how much they truly love us."
Thank you. This is the strangest book that I've ever written. And I didn't want to write it. Lisa was right. It's inconceivable that something could have taken me from a novel that I was writing. It actually didn't have a publication date, it wasn't finished. So it had, I was in a second draft. And it is very compelling. And so this book came. It's the story of a woman that apparently the evidence is that I met "50 years ago. She came to this country, to the Women's Building in the Feminist Studio Workshop in 1974. She was apparently in my journal writing class. I know that because there's a little publication that we created and she's in it, not as a writer, but as a graphic artist. Nevertheless, I don't remember her. And writing the book hasn't brought her closer. But I wrote the book at the urging of her brother, who is with her. And he published the hardback of this book in Berlin. The ancestors who are the subject of this book are also his. So it's a mystery that he participates in fully. And it couldn't happen without him. Perhaps one day he'll tell us about what drove him to bring this book into the world. The book proceeds like a process of discovery. And when you read it, you will go through the same process I went through in discovering. I think that's Ina Andreae's intent. She is the ghost. Her presence and her activity are irrefutable, as you will see when you read it. Ultimately, she wants us to understand what it feels like to be so agonized by what one's ancestors did that she couldn't bear living, that she took her own life. What does it mean to have such understanding and shame of the unconscionable behavior of one's grandparents and great-grandparents, that one has to take one's life? One has to take one's life. But also waited 50 years to tell this story. What her ancestors did was support Hitler's regime as industrialists at the core of the war effort. That war is the one that those of my generation still call the war. The reason that it's so important that we hear Ina's story is that the times that we are in The actions of the regime we live within are frighteningly similar to the times of her ancestors. We will be the ancestors our descendants will look toward to discover what we did and how we lived. This is a time of gravitas, as we've never known. Such a time killed Ina after the fact. May we find ways to meet these horrific times. One of the things I've been thinking about is that we're in this perhaps tiny moment when we have an opportunity to do something. Because if things persist as they seem to be going, there may no longer be a time. So I'm going to start reading to you from the afterword, actually. I'm going to start reading from the words that I had to write when I finished the book. And the reason I had to write it was that every day events happened that seemed exactly related to what had happened in the war, the Great War, World War II. So the afterword begins this way. And it plays with the idea that as I often do in my writing, but this time it seemed even more important. There's a writer who was myself, but she's still the writer. And then there's Deena, this person who's talking to you. I, Deena Metzger, the actual writer and not the character in the book, who sometimes can't avoid speaking in first person, am writing this. And afterward, because the times we are in mirror the fall of the Weimar Republic and the rise of the Nazi state. This text becomes outdated week by week, though we will attempt to update it as best as we can before publication. The various references and quotes indicate how someone may read it about us 80 years from now, if someone survives. I was in Berlin, East and West, in April 1989, just before the wall came down. There was still rubble in the streets. I say this because we really do need to understand that wars don't end when they end. The Weimar Republic was the German state from 1918 to 1933, during which it was a constitutional republic for the first time in history. According to Timothy W. Rybeck, writing in The Atlantic, January 2025, just as Truman was inaugurated as president of the United States, Hitler dismantled the democracy in 53 days. Quote, 92 years ago this month, on Monday morning, January 30th, 1933, Adolf Hitler was appointed the 15th Chancellor of the Weimar Republic. In one of those most astonishing political transformations in the history of democracy, Hitler set about destroying a constitutional republic through constitutional means. Hitler systematically disabled and then dismantled his country's democratic structures and processes in less than 2 months' time, specifically 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 days, 8 hours, and 40 minutes. In my own country, which has been a democratic nation since 1775, the current elected president has been in power since January 20th, 2025. That is merely 33 days as I first write these words, and just 4 to 5 months as I conclude them. He has, like Hitler, been governing by fiat, by executive orders, through rulings resonant with those once enacted to ensure the rise of Nazis. At the precise time of this whirlwind of chaos and devastation, enter Ina Andreae. Her true presence is undeniable. It is mind-breaking. She gave her life for our consciousness, but could not rest until we became aware of the meaning of her death. So she returns at a time when this awareness is critical. She took her own life and she offers it back to us. She is alive among us here. She calls us to make appropriate amends for the crimes of our ancestors and for our own collaboration, for our own failure to understand what is happening, for our own inability to know what to do, for our own fears. These words I just said are not in the afterword. But as time has been going on, they seemed essential to say. And in a way, this book is an ongoing book. It's not only the words that are on the page, but they're the words that come because this being, this ghost, came and is here and keeps showing us at every moment what is happening. Because the real mystery that is completely unanswered, except in this way, is why did she wait 15 years? And why did Wolfgang want to come and discover the reason for her death years before, but wasn't able until this moment, when the book comes out at this moment? Because the ghosts have insight and foresight, and that's the magic of it. She calls us to make appropriate amends for the crimes of our ancestors, to cease our own criminal behavior and crimes against humanity and genocide, and to refuse to cooperate with either national or international criminal behavior. Her activity is precise. I don't think she's desperate. I think she is determined. Might this imply that there is a sliver of hope if we listen from our hearts and act determinedly from the heart? If we listen from our broken hearts, so this is the beginning of the book. Dear Wolfgang, it's quite marvelous to do this now, looking at you and Michelle, and I'll say it directly to them. You asked for a story. Or maybe Ina asked. Or maybe Ina is asking. If so, we must not refuse the dead. Here is the story. It isn't once upon a time because it really happened. Nevertheless, it is a story. The story occurs when all the events are gathered in a sphere as opposed to being laid out in a straight timeline. And then what happens converts through all the parts relating to each other to reveal everything, including what is being hidden, including the meaning of these events. The writer received an email from a stranger in the summer of 2022, when we were still involved in the pandemic. His name was Wolfgang, and she thought immediately of Belleville or Wolf, who were a single character in her play Dreams Against the State, who don't matter to this story, but they do. Belleville, a spirit who inhabited Wolf, the character, was the last survivor of the Warsaw Ghetto. Sometimes when Wolf appeared on the stage, Belleville, like a boiling geyser, would emerge from him and take over. He carried a bag of bones, cleaned of flesh at Auschwitz, but not spirit. They belonged to his wife, daughter, and son. He dug into the sack, pulled out a bone, and admired it. Then he spoke to the audience and his daughter. Look at this bone. It's my Rachel. How beautiful you are. This throwing of the bones was a different kind of divination used to awaken the agony of memory. Wolfgang Andreae was writing to her from Germany because he was investigating the circumstances of his sister Ina's death and thought the writer might be able to shed some light upon it. It needed light because it was a dark death, self-imposed, a suicide carefully planned and tested before it was realized, dark in the middle of the dark night, so it could be hidden. But so this time, the suicide would succeed. I wrote back politely that I didn't remember his sister and couldn't enlighten him. He said he'd be visiting in the winter and asked if he could see me anyway. The writer couldn't refuse a man in mourning for his sister. So she agreed. Each knew nothing of the true reasons for Ina's death. They had to discover it between them, between us, as if Ina had just come to life to do the deed, the suicide happening again and again. He didn't come that winter. Later, he said he had a heart attack, a mild injury to the heart. She understood immediately he had had heartbreak. Then when he wrote again, she reminded him that she had no memories of his sister whatsoever, but he persisted. Months later, he did arrive in California. As he was making his way to her door, she realized as she saw his shadow stretching toward her across the bricks that she had imagined a young man. So she was surprised to see this tall, almost elderly man approach her door. The appearance of the older man added gravity to their meeting. What remained strange was that it was 2024, and he was investigating the death of his sister in 1975. He wanted to honor her and create a little book about her life, about her work. It was as if he had just lost his sister and was mourning her while trying to understand what had occurred. The writer accommodated him. As they spoke, she began to understand that he did not ever consider being as affected as his sister had been about the circumstances which led to her death. It had not occurred to him that Ina's field of inquiry could have been his as well. As a consequence, Ina's concerns became the writer's. Then, slowly and inevitably, Wolfgang seemed to be drawn into a story he hadn't known was his. Investigation became soul-searching. It was disconcerting. It was disorienting. Most of what could or should have been in the open in order to understand had not been seen as consequential at first, or it had been avoided or hidden. Then history had appeared unexpectedly. It had to be reckoned with. What was the writer to do? Not remembering the sister and having no idea whatsoever what had led to her death, she originally thought she could offer Wolfgang an understanding of the social and political milieu that his sister Ina had entered when she came to the United States from Germany to join the feminist studio workshop at the Women's Building as an artist. Maybe the impact of the two cultures had affected Ina. Maybe the wild and radical changes introduced by feminism had disturbed her. The tiny house where the writer lived was in a rural area at the end of an unpaved road of rocks, dirt, and gravel. You really have to want to reach the house to navigate it. Because she was a writer, her lifestyle was casual. She had no desire to serve in a formal way or to be served. And this, perhaps, was what interested Ina about the woman. For Ina had been longing for social and educational institutions without hierarchy and was pained by any display of rank or privilege, even the student-teacher relationship. Perhaps this was because she had been born into a life of advantage, and as we will discover, but not in time to save Ina's life, a life sustained by ill-gotten gains. The Feminist Studio Workshop was not simply an educational institution. It was established simultaneously with the Women's Building, the two together becoming a cultural center and a sanctuary for young women in particular, who could not thrive in the dominant culture no more than Ina could flourish within the formalities and restrictions of her German family. The goal of cultural feminism was for women's culture and values, the unique woman's voice, the feminine, the feminist, to influence society and its institutions in ethical ways. That is to undo patriarchy. The second wave of feminism in Los Angeles was a tsunami, but one in which Ina would have, but not one in which Ina would have drowned. As it turned out, it was her past, that is her family's past and history, that took her down. Now, as I write all these words, what is so heartbreaking is that we are going through this same situation now, and that we cannot listen to this as innocence, and we cannot listen to it as if it happened then, and we cannot listen to it as if it does not concern us. And because we don't know how long we can listen to such words. Wolfgang, Michelin, and the writer are speaking amicably about Ina. This is the first visit. More than 2 hours have passed. This may be the time that Wolfgang says casually that Ina had not wanted to take her grandmother's money when she was studying in Dusseldorf, where she taught English to support herself. However, she had no choice but to accept it when she came to the United States and the Feminist Studio Workshop. Why didn't she want to take her grandmother's money? It was her grandmother's inheritance from Blumenvoss. What is Blumenvoss? Blumenvoss was the largest military, shipbuilding, and engineering company in Germany, once the largest in the world. They also became an aircraft manufacturing company aligned with Messerschmitt under Hitler. Long silence. Then, as if another question had been asked, yes, she tried to commit suicide by jumping off a dock right next to Blumenvoss, dressed elegantly with a bouquet of flowers in her hand. It was 1968 or 1969. Ina came to Los Angeles in 1974 and committed suicide in 1975 at a remote outcropping in Death Valley, alone. I hope I won't embarrass him too much to say what an extraordinary man Wolfgang is, that we're doing this, that I'm reading this with him here, that it is his sister, who I think knew that he would follow through, that there's some profound alliance between this ghost and this man, and this extraordinary moment that we are all in together. I don't know if such a moment has ever existed before. And I can't just read to you without noting it. So on the one hand, we are in this critical time, nationally and internationally. That sometimes seems as hopeless as it seemed in 1933. And on the other hand, it is undeniable that this spirit has come so that we know the story. And so rather than wait at the end and say, you know, there is some hope because the spirits exist. And so this contradiction, is it not, between the spirits that come to help and the ancestors that we have to make amends for. And the necessity that we don't become those ancestors. I think I'd like to read one more thing to you, and then maybe we'll have a conversation. Give me a moment to find it. You might imagine I'm a little undone. This is the second reading. I was very undone by the first reading, because this is real. That's what's really crazy about it. This is a real moment. I guess that's what literature does. Okay. I've just reminded myself that these pages are numbered. And so I can find this. I had a very, very overwhelming moment after I met Wolfgang and Micheline. I had no idea what Bloom and Vos was. And so I went to Wikipedia. And this is from Wikipedia about this shipbuilding company. This is the section called the Nazi Era, 1933 to 1945. When Hermann Blohm died in 1930, his two sons, Rudolf Blohm and Walter Blohm, had taken over in 1918. Ernest Vos had left long before. By this time in 1930, the company was in financial crisis So the Blohm brothers diversified into aircraft, setting up their company in the summer of 1933. With the rise of the Nazi Party to power in 1933, Germany began to rearm, and both companies became increasingly involved in the program. The shipyard built both civilian craft and warships for the government, including the battleship Bismarck, before manufacturing U-boats in quantity. In 1944, a subtank of a concentration camp was set up in the company's shipyard in Hamburg. It supplied labor to the company from October 1944 to April 1945. That's when I was undone. There were two moments that made the writing of this book necessary. The slave labor camp, which Ina did not know about, nor did Wolfgang until, don't remember the date, maybe 1914. And Trump's election. So Ina came to the Feminist Studio workshop deeply burdened in ways that no one really knew about. And the first person she met at the workshop was a woman named Sheila Ruth, an artist. And over time, she wrote Sheila Ruth a letter. And then she wrote it again. And then she wrote it a third time. And I'm going to read to you from the first part of the letter, and then the third letter. There's a little repeat, and that's necessary because that's how we remember, and that's how we know things, by going over them again and again. That's also the way trauma works. It happens again and again, like war does. Doesn't end until we end the mind that creates it. Hello, Sheila Ruth. I'm happy to be writing to you since you were the first woman I met from the building and from the workshop. It was a hot, dusty day and I was very depressed. The moment I want to tell you about was the moment when I jumped off the bridge in Hamburg. The freedom, the eternity, power, total disinterest in the world, the people, diving deep, dirty water, no memory, up again, losing shoe, clutching, purse drifting, underneath bridge, don't care what happens, hopeless, hapless, boat, big scramble, looking, people, dress, blue dress, boat, lifesaver. They pulled me in. I'm not grateful. I'm nothing. Sit on the edge, rocks, cement, ambulance, siren, 3 times river. Why did you do it? Say nothing. Harbor, hospital, neon, derelict, large whitish room, stuck in bed. Grandmother comes. and says she has to take a whole lot of Baldrian. Go home, wet, first exam, Old English grammar at 4. The grandmother, Louise, came and complained she had had to take a whole lot of Baldrian, Valerian, and then went home. No surprise. She's Louise Andreae, wife of Max Andreae, whose first wife had been Ina Blom. Dear Sheila Ruth, this is my 3rd attempt at a letter to you, and I can't say it's getting any easier at all. Here I am, Sunday night, tired enough to permit myself to go to sleep instantly, but keeping awake because I dread the perspective of waking up tomorrow morning, knowing I didn't do it after all that worry and not dealing, or rather being afraid to deal with. The moment when the cab stops in the harbor, when I scrambled out a black cab in Hamburg, I have been given the driver a 5 marks coin in advance. It includes a fat tip. I turn and run. It's a hot, crowded day. Shortly before 1, I'm here again. It looks different. The last time there was Sunday, and the old man with the sailor's cap was there and gave me a sweet liquor and said, no, he wouldn't tell me how they had done it here. One never knew. And he looked at me. People come here and do things, he said. And he shook his head and looked at me, and it was peaceful. And I sat down on the bench behind his cabin, a cabin surrounded by water, the dirty, oily water of Hamburg's Elbe, Hamburg's industry, Hamburg's lungs that breeze to the ocean. The oily water of freighters and tugboats hooting and bustling, freighters, steamships, warships, ships, first imperial, then Republican ships, then with swastikas, now international. Whoever pays best. Ships built by my family, my grandmother's name Blom looming hundreds of feet high on top of the scaffolding. But her name was Ina, like mine like hers, Ina, not Blom. Or was it the same? Blom up high above the huge constructions on the other side of the river. When the shift changes, hundreds of sweaty men in dark denims cross over on ships, crowd up the passageway, and disappear into the subway tunnel. Blom. The moment has just begun, Sheila. It is a covered bridge, turquoise blue on the outside, oddly curved, and at the end of it, a visiting U.S. destroyer open today for the public to expect and admire the strength, perfection of our powerful ally. I'm running. It is a bright day, dusty slabs of sidewalk cement, and then the shadow and the wooden planks of the bridge. I stop short. People, sailors, mothers with children, strollers. I could not wait in line any longer. I had worked on it for weeks, pored over the book, carving phrases laboriously, with a mind too numb to tell the difference between chapters, taking a sentence, changing the verb to make it sound different, staring at the line, turning the page, picking the new verb, waiting to be called to lunch, dinner, refusing the blue bow stuck into my hair from behind. Why do you always dress so dark? And what a hot day. And would you get the napkins? I move slowly, pale, withdrawn, my hair tied back. Can I help? I lift the tea cart onto the veranda, just one end of it though. I could never hold both ends without spilling something. Grandfather comes, and grandmother. Not Ina, though. She died long ago. He has fine, smooth, gentle hands. He peels a pear. Maybe it's breakfast. He does this for breakfast or for dessert. I sit and stare, and they talk around me. I wish I could be entertaining, could think of something to say, but it's numb and gray, and they talk around me, smile at me. And would you like some more potatoes? And they talk about newspapers, reports, the garden. Grandfather stares ahead in the distance, in the past, business for the company, and all the Sundays spent when Ina was alive, having formal dinners with her parents, the Bloms. And I am 20 now. Who knows? I put back the napkins, bring grandfather his vermouth, stare into the garden. The bushes are green and cheerful, and everybody sighs. What a nice day. What a nice day. And I go up the 2 stories to my room. I was stopped short, and I am again here on the bridge. This is the moment, running from the cab. The man coming toward me is too far away, and the woman with a child has just passed me. It is safe. I dash to the left, climb onto the railing. 1 second, a glimpse, and the rest is mine. Ina writes this in May 1975, 7 years after this dramatic attempt at erasing her name by erasing herself from Blumenvos. She had been staying in Hamburg with her grandfather, P. Max Andreae, director of Blumenvos, and his second wife, Louise, the one who took all the Baldrian. His first wife had been Ina, her namesake, the daughter of Hermann Bloss, who founded Blumenvos. Ina only knew so much. She knew also that her grandfather on her mother's side had been the publisher of a liberal paper. It had been taken over by the Nazis. And he stayed with it. And he was a member of the party. So on both sides, she was involved with the Nazi regime. The thing you need to know well, let me read this a little bit. This is about the grandfather publisher. Perhaps he not only joined the Nazi party, but was himself a Nazi. The writer cannot determine this. How impenetrable those times were, not unlike these times now. It was very difficult to understand the complexity around the newspaper and their grandparents. But she knows this. Nazism is a system and a political philosophy and a set of values and attitudes. It is difficult, maybe even impossible, to be untouched by it when immersed in its way of thinking, unless one is engaged in active opposition. Ina had been in it, but she had not been of it. here we are in this strange time. We can find all the parallels. The attack on the universities, on law firms, on the justice system. Opposition becoming heresy. The attack on the disabled. Sexual, the attack on gender, on diversity. It's all parallel, as if Trumpism is following a playbook that was started in 1933. And here we are with this ghost who is calling us to such awareness. And in this strangely magical moment, when we're brought to a terrible awareness, mysterious, here we are. So,
Deena, would you be open to Lisa and I maybe asking you a few questions before we open it up to the audience? We've got about 20 minutes left.
absolutely.
Lisa, do you have any questions or comments, observations?
Well, my favorite line in the whole book, I was hoping you would mention it, Deena, but you didn't say it, so I'll say it. The knife of history carved the shape of Ina's life.
Mm.
That's a great line. Thank you.
And from now on, Deena, I wanted to introduce you as Ina and Deena. Because she's come to so thoroughly inhabit you.
Say this again.
I was going to say, and now I'm going to pass it over to Deena and Ina, because she's come to so thoroughly inhabit you.
I guess so. Yeah, I don't know. I think she was talking to you. I think she's incredibly happy and satisfied. One that we're paying attention profoundly, and the other that her brother is here. And her brother has really done this remarkable work. True brother.
Yeah. Deena, this didn't come through quite as much in the readings, but Ina, you mentioned that Ina was an artist, and one of her art forms was performance art. And I think art, in whatever form, it can pierce the human heart in ways that other forms of communications cannot. And I wonder if you have any sense, I don't think I had picked up on it before that suicide attempt from the bridge, she would have been 13 years old. Is that correct? No? I thought it was 1968 or 1969. So she was a teenager. No?
No, she was born in 49. So so she was already 20.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
So
Um,
yeah.
I'm wondering if you have a sense of, a- as an artist, a performance artist, who she felt her audience was
Hmm.
for those suicide attempts. Do you think back then it was just her family and the audience has become larger through this book, or?
You know, that's such an interesting question. I don't think the last attempt was really that was serious. It happened, but there were three attempts before that were not, I think, serious in the same way. But in my view of them, which is now my view of them, but I think when you read the book, you'll see the evidence for it. Um, she was enacting the life of other artists or women that she was involved with, that she admired. So the first attempt felt like Frida Kahlo. And she was desperate. She was young. She couldn't bear it. But she was also enacting. I think she did that for Frida Kahlo. In the second attempt, we know she jumped off the bridge. The third, which I call her Ophelia moment, it had that quality with the flowers,
Hmm.
the flowers. The third attempt was Virginia Woolf. We have to contemplate it,
Hmm.
but it didn't feel so much like an audience as an alliance with a figure that, by allying, gave it a large perspective.
Fascinating.
It's what art does, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of course,
Um,
well, I think, and make sure that he has some time if he wishes to speak, and maybe the way in is, I think Wolfgang has more of an understanding of Ina as an artist than I do.
Actually, it's for me difficult to really talk about Ina as an artist, but it's she is an artist, but I think that she is uh, what I for me actually what she has written is more art than the paintings and the performances. Of course, from the performances we don't have as much. Don't have any material. There was a very early already a video she made together with Leslie Lowowitz uh, in Germany in 73. But of course, we have her pictures and these different red phases. And so the red was always a very important color for her. But I've been working now on the German texts during the last month, and always when I read it, I really have a feeling that she really was a good writer. So it really gets more into my heart actually than what she writes than her paintings. But yeah, so this is of course not qualified uh, talk now on this, but um, I think that Leslie will go into this a lot more at our reading than on the 19th. But so I think that's the,
Really just
yeah,
what
because she,
I want you to make sure that
yeah,
you have a chance to speak or be silent as you wish.
sure, yeah. Okay, so yeah, that would be, at this stage for my side, but because well, I think I don't have to. You said like the most important things already, so I don't want to. If there aren't any other dedicated questions to me, but I wouldn't make a talk of my own at the moment, so I haven't prepared anything.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deena, it was 6 weeks ago yesterday since the book has come out, and obviously things have only continued to escalate in terms of what's happening here in this country in particular. In the afterword, you encourage us to listen from and act from our heart. And I find myself wondering, given your life, all the things that you've focused on throughout your life, and also the depth of research you've done on this book, knowing where things could potentially go, um, how how do you keep an open heart? How do you not become numb or paralyzed or embittered? Are there any practices you have as all of us walk away thinking about what you've shared here? Just curious about that.
Well, I think that in this particular instance, the fact of this being coming in and creating this event is so astonishing and so wondrous that it's an entirely different understanding of what life is. And it takes one out of the narrowness of our secular constructions. So the fact that Ina exists to me is that spirit exists. And if spirit exists, then everything and anything is possible. But even more importantly, that spirit exists is wondrous. That's enough to keep your heart open. That no matter what else, that wondrousness exists. And then I keep my heart open, or my heart stays open, because life is so amazing.
Mm.
And how could I not continue to love it? I had a very difficult moment, which I won't talk about now, probably will write about it the other day. And I thought, how am I going to deal with this? It was just one of those overwhelming political moments. So I went out on the land and take 30 seconds. The wind came in. Sharon English is shaking her head. She's one of those who's gone from the city, from Toronto to the land. And that we've been cut off from the land is part of why this is happening. And so to be connected with that it really does it. I mean, you can spend your time in fear, or you can spend your time loving.
Yeah.
And that's a real choice.
Thank you. We've got about 9 minutes left. Do we want to open it up to the audience? No, is this now a good time? If anyone has a question or comment for Deena, you can unmute yourself. Margie?
I am so touched that Wolfgang is here and spoke. It made me in touch with Ina strongly. Thank you so much. I feel like she is inhabiting you. I know what it's like to be a sister, and it just moved me deeply. Thank you.
Just might give these thanks on to Deena at this stage because I didn't say anything in that direction yet. So I just is that you really took up this on you and really were so always you kept me moving and so this was really is this interaction between the two of us was really very good and really heartwarming at every stage. And so I'm very thankful to you that you've done this with me. So yeah, that I just wanted to remark that.
Mary Fillmore said that her connection is very poor, so she won't speak, but wanted to say how stunningly apt this work is. She feels as though Ina is sitting right beside her.
Well, I want to say with a little amusement that she's wearing a dress that could match Ina's painting, and I noticed it immediately. I, I can't show the painting because the technology won't allow it, but it was another way of feeling Ina here. So she is sitting next to her.
Mm. Margot?
Yes. Deena, I have a question. In the beginning, when you first spoke, and when you first spoke of Ina, you said that her, if I understood, that her coming to you was one of her ways of making amends. And what I've been wondering about as I've been listening to you tonight is what way is there for us as being here now to make amends before we end it all?
Well, she made amends for her family by having their story told at a particular time when it makes a difference to hear the story. And she didn't know everything. She didn't know about the camps. I don't know what would have happened to her had she known. When I feel into her, I feel like that I can feel how she couldn't bear it. For me to make amends, I had to tell this story, whether I wanted to or not, whether I was doing something else, whether I was afraid. There's a line in the book where I talk about the rise of Nazism as the rise of Trumpism. It's not easy to say that. But I also know that we read about, resistance, and you always think it's someone else. And then one day it's you. And in this particular time, it's still us. There's still an opportunity for it to be us. And there's some way in which we have to examine how the very nature of our lives and our indulgence in them has created these situations. I just watched a film that was made, I've forgotten the year, I think 2006 maybe, by Max Ophuls, Hotel Terminus. Klaus Barbie, who's called The Butcher of Lyon. And it's a very interesting film because the entire range of people's response to Barbie and the fact that he was this astonishing butcher. But the CIA used him immediately after the war because they were so obsessed with communism. They would do anything against it. And they gave him and other criminals safe passage. And I speak a lot about that in the book also. I speak about Operation Paperclip, which allowed many of the scientists from Nazi Germany to come to the United States. Because we recognize that they may have lost the war, but they won the technological military. They didn't lose that. They continued it. There are so many ways, Margot. But I think the first way is awareness. The first way is deep moral inquiry into who we are and our lives. And this culture and the truth of it. And the good part of that is that everyone can do that. And every act is that little butterfly wing, But each one of them matters. Everything we do matters. And it goes either way. And so this is not a time of not being empowered. This is a time of exquisite opportunity on behalf of life. It's not our own lives, it really is on behalf of life. Life itself. That's how critical things are. Maybe if it weren't that, I wouldn't have the courage to write this book and put it out. But that's the terrible reality of it. So I put Ina in your hands. Luckily, you can be with her. You can read the book. she's become a being. You know, she's become like a little mythic figure. I wish she could. I mean, I know she knows. I wish the living Ina would know this moment. But what a soul she was and is, and how grateful we are to her.
Mm.
So,
And I will just mention to anyone who happens to be in the LA area, on October 19th, Deena and Ina and Wolfgang and Ina's college friend, Leslie Leibowitz Stayris, will be together on stage at Beyond Baroque in LA talking about the book. So that is certainly an event that is not to be missed if you're in the area. And thank you so much to everyone for being with us this afternoon. Any final words, Deena, Lisa?
oh, just thank you, Lisa, and thank you, Kristen, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Wolfgang and Micheline, and blessings to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
You.